The Zukar Empire ruled the stars with an iron fist, their technologically superior warships casting shadows over countless systems. The galaxy had long bowed to their will, with the alien civilization's massive fleets obliterating any threats that dared challenge their dominance. The Zukar were a force to be reckoned with, feared and respected by every other species they encountered. Their ships were like titans, sleek, powerful, and bristling with advanced weaponry. On the fringes of the galaxy, the human race had barely begun to make its mark. The Earth was still a distant player, far removed from the great galactic wars and alliances that had defined the cosmos for centuries. Humans had made significant technological advances, but they were still regarded as primitive by most of the galaxy's more advanced civilizations. And so, when the Zukar Empire's sensors detected a lone human warship approaching their borders, they saw it as nothing more than an insignificant blip in the deep void of space, a stray ship, likely lost or outmatched by the superior might of the Empire. The U.S. Sovereign, a marvel of human engineering, was exactly the kind of ship the Zukar didn't expect. Its design was unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. Compact, agile, and packed with cutting-edge technology that far exceeded what humans should have been capable of. But it was alone, a single ship, no fleet, no reinforcements, just the Sovereign, creeping toward the heart of Zukar space, seemingly unaware of the immense danger it was about to walk into. The Zukar fleet leader, Supreme Commander Scar, watched the ship's movement through his starboard viewport, amusement on his face. The human vessel had crossed into their territory without permission, and in their arrogance, the humans hadn't even attempted to hide their approach. To the Zukar, it was a signal of weakness, a foolish act that would soon be corrected. "How many ships do we have in the sector?" Scar asked, his voice cold but confident. 30 destroyers, 3 battlecruisers, and 2 dreadnoughts, Commander," one of his officers replied, bowing low. "All are ready for engagement." "Good. Send a message to the human ship," Scar ordered. "Tell them to turn back or face the consequences." Moments later, the message crackled across the U.S. Sovereign's comm system. A booming voice in an alien tongue echoed over the bridge. "You have entered Zukar-controlled space, human. Turn around and leave immediately, or you will be destroyed." Captain Elise Harrison stood at the helm of the U.S. Sovereign, her sharp gaze scanning the stars beyond the viewports. She knew their mission was one of exploration, not conquest. But she also understood the politics of space. The Zukar had been eyeing Earth for some time, considering it an easy target. They didn't care that humanity was new to the galactic stage. They saw an opportunity, and they wanted to claim it. Harrison responded with unshakable calm. "This is Captain Elise Harrison of the U.S. Sovereign. We are on a peaceful mission and wish to avoid conflict. However, we will not retreat from our path. If you choose to engage, we will fight." There was a brief silence. Then, without warning, the Zukar fleet opened fire. The Sovereign's shields flared brightly, absorbing the plasma blasts, their energy rippling harmlessly across the ship's advanced defense system. Harrison's hand tightened on the controls, her crew ready for action. "Brace for impact. Return fire at will," she ordered, her voice steady but intense. The battle began, not with a roar of rage, but with a calculated precision that would soon make the Zukar question everything they knew about humanity. The first strike of plasma fire had only been the beginning. The U.S. Sovereign was about to show the Zukar exactly why they should never have underestimated humanity. The U.S. Sovereign trembled as the first volley of Zukar plasma fire struck its shields. The ship's outer hull sparked with energy as the protective layers absorbed the impact, but it held firm. Captain Elise Harrison's eyes narrowed as she watched the damage reports flash across the command console. The shields were holding, but the Zukar weren't letting up. If anything, they were escalating their assault. "All systems report," Harrison barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "Shields at 85%, Captain," Lieutenant Hawk replied, his fingers dancing over the console. Weapons are primed and ready. Initiate evasive maneuvers, Harrison ordered. Get us out of the line of fire and return fire with everything we got. Show them what humanity is made of. The U.S. Sovereign surged forward, its sleek, agile design cutting through space with surprising speed. The Zukar fleet, momentarily caught off guard by the human ship's unexpected agility, struggled to keep up. The alien warships, huge, hulking behemoths, fired plasma bolts and energy beams at the Sovereign, but the human ship was too fast, too unpredictable. It twisted, turned, and darted through the void, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. In the blink of an eye, the Sovereign's primary weapon system locked onto the nearest Zukar destroyer. A sharp, explosive pulse of energy shot out from the ship's forward cannons, slamming into the alien vessel with unrelenting force. The destroyer's shields flared briefly before collapsing entirely, and the blast tore through the ship's hull like paper. Within moments, the Zukar destroyer exploded in a brilliant fireball. A stunned silence followed. Harrison didn't pause for a moment. Keep moving. Focus fire on the next target. Now, the Sovereign was a living, breathing beast in the hands of its crew. The crew, a mix of veterans and eager young officers, had been trained for moments like this, when humanity's very survival depended on their ability to adapt and overcome. On the Zukar side, Supreme Commander Scar watched in disbelief as the human ship tore through their forces with almost unnatural precision. They had underestimated the humans. They had expected an easy victory, but the Sovereign was anything but easy to defeat. Its weapons were unlike anything the Zukar had encountered, its maneuvers unpredictable, and its crew relentless. They weren't just fighting a ship, they were fighting a species. "Commander, they've disabled one of our destroyers," one of Scar's officers reported, his voice shaky. "Their technology. It's far more advanced than we anticipated." Scar's expression hardened. "Prepare all ships to engage with full firepower. This human vessel will be crushed." The Zukar fleet, shaken but still formidable, coordinated a full-scale assault. Dozens of ships swarmed the U.S. Sovereign, their weapons charging, ready to unleash everything they had. Harrison could see the enemy forces closing in on all sides. This wasn't going to be easy. But then again, nothing about humanity's history had ever been easy. "All hands, brace for impact," Harrison shouted, gripping her command chair. "Weapons, keep them on their heels. Don't give them a chance to breathe." The Sovereign dodged a massive blast from his car battlecruiser, spiraling to the left. The ship's rear thrusters flared, pushing them into a sharp roll. As the ship stabilized, the forward-facing weapon systems locked onto their next target. A car dreadnought, a massive ship bristling with heavy weaponry, targeting the dreadnought's central core. Lieutenant Hawk called out, "Firing now." Another brilliant pulse of energy shot from the Sovereign, slamming into the dreadnought's armored hull. The Zukar ship groaned under the pressure, the shields buckling before the pulse tore through the outer defenses, punching a hole straight into the core of the massive vessel. The dreadnought shuddered, then split in half as the explosion ripped it apart from within. The Zukar fleet reeled in shock, their confidence shattered. They had expected to easily overwhelm the humans, but instead they were facing something they couldn't fully comprehend. A single human ship was now reducing their once dominant armada to a handful of crippled, desperate survivors. Supreme Commander Scar stared at the chaos unfolding on his screens. His battle-hardened mind couldn't fathom how this was happening. "What are these humans?" he muttered under his breath. "They're far more than we ever expected," one of his officers replied, his voice faltering. "And they're not stopping." The U.S. Sovereign wasn't backing down. It was just getting started. The U.S. Sovereign surged forward, undeterred by the chaos around it. The Zukar fleet had thrown everything they had at the human ship, yet the Sovereign still cut through their lines like a hot knife through butter. The Zukar had underestimated humanity's ingenuity, and now their overconfidence was costing them dearly. Captain Harrison stood resolute at the helm, Her eyes focused on the chaotic scene unfolding across the holographic displays. The Zakar fleet, although damaged, wasn't out of the fight yet. Their warships circled like predators, regrouping for a final push. They were preparing to launch a full-force assault on the U.S. Sovereign, hoping to overwhelm the human ship with sheer numbers. But Harrison wasn't going to let that happen. "We need to turn the tide. Prepare for Phase 2, she ordered, her voice calm but unyielding. "Deploy the Singularity Cannon." A low hum reverberated through the ship as the experimental weapon activated. The Singularity Cannon was humanity's hidden ace, an untested, devastating piece of technology capable of manipulating space-time itself. The crew had been briefed on the theoretical principles, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer magnitude of power it could unleash. Now they had no choice but to use it. "We're ready, Captain," Lieutenant Hawk said, his fingers flying across the console. The tension was palpable. The weapon had never been fired in combat before, and they were all aware of the risks. "Do it," Harrison commanded, her gaze fixed on the display. A pulse of energy shot out from the U.S. Sovereign, and for a split second, the space around them warped, distorting as if reality itself had been bent. A small black hole formed in the void, only a few meters wide, but its gravitational pull was already immense. The Singularity Cannon had activated. The black hole shot forward, devouring the emptiness of space. Within moments, it reached the first Zakar ship in its path, a heavily armored dreadnought. The alien vessel tried to maneuver, but it was too late. The gravitational force of the Singularity overwhelmed the ship's engines, drawing it toward the event horizon. Within seconds, the dreadnought was consumed, torn apart as the black hole crushed it into nothingness. The Zakar fleet watched in horror as their prized warship vanished in an instant. "Captain," Lieutenant Hawk warned, his voice tinged with awe. "The rest of the fleet is attempting to fall back and regroup. They're trying to figure out what just happened." "They've never seen anything like this," Harrison replied, watching as the remaining Zakar ships hesitated. The shockwaves of the destruction rippled through the Zakar ranks, sowing confusion and fear. The human ship had revealed a weapon they couldn't possibly understand. "Deploy secondary EMP devices," Harrison ordered, her fingers brushing across the command panel. "We'll disable their communication systems and cripple their fleet's coordination." The Sovereign's secondary weapon systems came to life. Tiny, compact EMP bursts shot out from the ship, each one sending pulses of electromagnetic energy into the Zakar fleet. In moments, entire sections of their battle groups went dark as their communication systems failed. Some ships veered off course, unable to properly communicate with their fellow vessels. Others found their weapons offline, unable to return fire. The U.S. Sovereign pressed the advantage. The crew worked together, firing on the disoriented Zakar ships with precision, taking out a cruiser here, a destroyer there. The once proud Zakar fleet was now in disarray. The aliens tried to recover, but they were fighting blind, unable to respond to the human ship's unpredictable tactics. The battle shifted from one of brute force to one of strategy. Captain Harrison wasn't just relying on firepower. She was outthinking the enemy at every turn. Every move was deliberate, every strike well-timed. The Zakar were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. This isn't possible," one of the Zakar commanders muttered, watching helplessly as his forces were picked apart. "How is it that they are doing this? How can they adapt so quickly?" Scar, who had been watching the events unfold from his flagship, clenched his fists in frustration. This was not the easy victory he had anticipated. The U.S. Sovereign had shattered his expectations, and now it was tearing through his fleet. "What are they?" Scar growled, his voice thick with disbelief. "This human ship, it is beyond our understanding." He hesitated for a moment, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. His mind raced, analyzing the situation, searching for a solution. "Gather the fleet," Scar said, his voice steadying. "We're not finished yet. We will crush this human ship. Whatever tricks they have, we will adapt." But even as he spoke, Scar knew the battle was slipping from his grasp. The U.S. sovereign had already proven that humanity's power wasn't just in its weapons or technology. It was in its will to fight. And that, above all else, was something the Scar could never anticipate. The battle had shifted. No longer was it just a war of weapons. Now, it was a clash of minds. The Scar fleet, once the undisputed terror of the galaxy, was slowly crumbling in the face of a single human warship. Captain Harrison's every move was calculated, her tactics as unpredictable as they were devastating. The Scar, accustomed to crushing enemies with overwhelming force, were struggling to counter the human ingenuity unfolding before them. The U.S. sovereign drifted just outside the range of a Scar destroyer, its shields flickering slightly under the strain but holding strong. The Scar were trying to adjust, trying to read the patterns of the human ship's movements, but it was like chasing shadows. The Sovereign wasn't predictable. It danced between light-speed evasions, sudden boosts, and impossible maneuvers, forcing the Scar to act on the fly. "We're almost out of range," Lieutenant Hawk warned, his voice tense. "We've hit their engines hard, but their flagship is still operational. We need to finish this now," Harrison replied, her fingers tapping rapidly against the console. She could sense it, the hesitation in the Scar fleet, the confusion. If they pushed now, if they pressed their advantage, they could break the Scar Empire's resolve. This wasn't just about defeating their ships. It was about sending a message that no one would forget. "We need to isolate their command," Harrison continued. "Give me a readout on their flagship. Target its communication systems. We'll cut them off completely." "Targeting now," Lieutenant Hawk said. His fingers flew across the console, and the ship's targeting systems hummed to life. The U.S. Sovereign's engines flared as it surged forward, dodging another plasma barrage from the Scar cruiser. As the Sovereign closed in on the flagship, the Scar fleet attempted to form a defensive perimeter. But it was too late. Harrison had already anticipated their move. "Deploy decoy drones," she ordered. From the Sovereign's cargo hold, a series of small, sleek drones shot into space, their energy signatures mimicking that of the human ship. The Scar fleet immediately locked onto the decoys, diverting their firepower and focusing their efforts on what they thought was the Sovereign. For a moment, the Scar flagship and its fleet were blind to the true threat approaching them. The U.S. Sovereign slipped past their defenses, moving with surgical precision. The Singularity cannon hummed to life once more, its energy coils glowing as the crew prepared to unleash the devastating weapon again. "Firing now," Lieutenant Hawk called out. The Singularity cannon released another pulse of raw, destructive energy, this time aimed directly at the Scar flagship's communication array. A jagged ripple of energy spread through space, distorting reality itself before the black hole took form. It shot toward the flagship at unimaginable speed. The Scar flagship, still reeling from the decoy trick, couldn't react fast enough. The black hole surged forward, consuming the communication tower in an instant, then expanding outward as it tore through the core of the ship. The flagship's shields flickered for a moment, then collapsed entirely as the Singularity's force reached the heart of the vessel. Within moments, the once mighty flagship was nothing but debris, swallowed by the destructive force. "Flagship down," Lieutenant Hawk reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Their command is gone." The remaining Scar fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to falter. Their ships, deprived of coordinated leadership, were scattered. Panic spread through the ranks, and many Scar vessels began to retreat, their crew's morale shattered. Captain Harrison watched the Scar retreat in silence for a moment. She had done it. The human ship had dismantled their greatest strength, their command structure. The Scar had been thrown into disarray, and now they were retreating into the unknown, their once feared empire on the verge of collapse. But Harrison knew this wasn't over yet. The Scar were too dangerous to be allowed to regroup. She wouldn't let them escape to fight another day. "Lieutenant, set a pursuit course. We can't let them lick their wounds," she said, her voice still cold, calculating. "We'll catch them." "Captain," Hawk replied, a confident smirk creeping across his face. "They're in no shape to put up a fight now." The U.S. Sovereign surged forward once more, closing the distance between itself and the remaining Zakar ships. The aliens were no longer the apex predators they once were. They were broken, their morale shattered, and the Sovereign wasn't about to let them recover. As the Sovereign prepared to finish what it had started, Captain Harrison's thoughts turned toward something greater than the immediate victory. Humanity had just proven its place in the galaxy, no longer a quiet, insignificant species, but a force to be reckoned with. A new era had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The U.S. Sovereign cut through the void with relentless precision, closing in on the fleeing remnants of the Zakar fleet. The fight had been long and brutal, but now the Zakar were broken, leaderless, and scrambling to escape. They no longer posed a real threat, and yet Captain Harrison knew that this was only the beginning. The Zakar would regroup, and humanity's presence in the galaxy would soon be known to every empire that held dominion over the stars. They had drawn blood, but the price of victory would be higher than they realized. "Captain," Lieutenant Hawk called from his station, his voice tinged with caution. "We've detected a strange energy signature. It's coming from a hidden location in the nearby asteroid belt." Harrison frowned. "Could it be another Zakar ship?" "I don't think so," Hawk replied, his fingers flying over the console. "It's not a ship, but something much larger. We're getting intermittent energy pulses. I'm not sure if it's an abandoned facility or something else." Her eyes narrowed. The Zakar weren't known for leaving loose ends, but this felt different. The last thing they needed was a new threat emerging from the shadows. "Set a course for the asteroid belt. Full power to engines. We'll investigate, but be prepared for anything," Harrison ordered, her tone firm. "Alert the crew and prepare for a possible ambush. I don't trust this." As the U.S. Sovereign changed course, the distant remnants of the Zakar fleet continued their retreat, their ships limping through space, barely functional. Harrison had no intention of chasing them further, not when a new unknown danger could be waiting just beyond the asteroid belt. Her mind raced through the possibilities. A hidden weapon, a trap, or perhaps something even more ominous. As the ship neared the asteroid field, the energy signature grew stronger. It was an odd rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. "Captain," Lieutenant Hawk said, his voice urgent, "I'm getting a better read on it now. It's a massive structure. A station, maybe a shipyard. But it's unlike anything we've seen before. It's emitting powerful energy pulses." Harrison stood at the command console, watching the data flood in. Her instincts told her to be cautious, but the unknown always beckoned. The universe was vast, and humanity had only begun to scratch the surface of the mysteries that lay beyond the stars. "Send a probe," she said after a moment's hesitation. "We need to confirm what we're dealing with." A small drone shot from the Sovereign and sped toward the asteroid belt, its sensors scanning the area with precision. The probe navigated around the jagged rocks and debris, quickly closing in on the source of the energy signature. It took a few moments, but then the probe's feed transmitted back to the Sovereign, revealing the hidden structure. It was enormous, a sprawling complex nestled deep within the heart of the asteroid field. The structure seemed ancient, its design unlike anything in the Zakar arsenal or human records. Jagged metal spires rose from the asteroid's surface, surrounded by colossal docking bays, massive turbines, and strange energy conduits that hummed with life. This wasn't just a station. This was a fortress, a remnant of some forgotten war, or perhaps a weapon of unimaginable power. "Captain, it appears to be dormant," Hawk reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "The energy readings are active, but the structure itself is silent, like it's waiting for something." A cold chill ran down Harrison's spine. She had seen enough to know that this could be a relic from an ancient civilization, one that had been lost to time, or perhaps a creation of this car, hidden away for a day when they would need it most. "We're not leaving without answers," Harrison said, her voice unwavering. "Bring the probe back. We need to get a closer look." Just as the drone was about to return, a loud beep echoed through the command deck. The signal from the probe abruptly cut off, replaced by static. "What happened?" Harrison demanded, turning to Hawk. The lieutenant's fingers flew across the controls. "I'm trying to re-establish the connection, Captain. It looks like something on that station just activated. The probe's data feed is gone." "Damn it," Harrison muttered under her breath. "I knew it was too easy." She felt a growing unease settle in her chest. Whatever that station was, it had just been disturbed. And that could mean only one thing. It was ready to fight back. "Battle stations," Harrison ordered, her tone grim. "Prepare for the worst. Something's coming." The U.S. Sovereign's crew scrambled to their stations, weapons primed and shields at the ready. Harrison gripped the armrest of her command chair, her mind working quickly. This car might be retreating, but they weren't the only threat out there. Something far older and far more dangerous was waiting in the shadows, and it was about to make its presence known. The U.S. Sovereign hovered just outside the asteroid belt, its sensors locked onto the dormant structure that loomed before them. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense, each member of the crew acutely aware that something had just shifted. The probe was lost, its signal completely wiped from existence, as if something had deliberately shut it down. Captain Harrison stood frozen at the helm, her mind racing. "Captain, we're getting a massive surge of energy," Lieutenant Hawk reported, his fingers flying across the console. "The station is powering up. It's coming online." "Any idea what it's doing?" Harrison's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her concern. Hawk hesitated for only a moment before replying. "It's too soon to tell, but the energy signatures are escalating. Whatever this structure is, it's reactivating. And it's focused on us." Harrison's heart raced. They had just encountered a car fleet, and now this. The universe was a far more dangerous place than she had ever imagined, and humanity had just earned its place as a major player on the galactic stage. But it seemed that with every victory came new, unforeseen threats. "Prepare for anything," Harrison said, her voice sharp. "Shields up. Weapons online. Get ready to move, but don't engage unless we have no choice." As she spoke, the massive structure before them began to rumble, its towering spires vibrating in response to the sudden influx of energy. A low hum emanated from the station, growing louder by the second. It felt almost alive, like the structure had been waiting for this moment. "Captain," Lieutenant Hawk called again, his voice more urgent now. "This isn't just a weapon. It's something else. The energy signature. It's unlike anything we've encountered. It's almost organic." Harrison felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Organic. The Zakar weren't known for using living constructs, and no known species had technology this strange. It was as if the station itself were some kind of ancient, sentient entity. "We need to learn more before making any decisions," Harrison muttered, her mind racing. If they engaged now, they could risk losing the Sovereign, and whatever was out there could become a threat to Earth itself. But if they didn't engage, if they waited too long, they could end up facing something much worse. Then, without warning, the first strike came. The station fired. A blinding beam of energy erupted from the structure's center, aimed directly at the U.S. Sovereign. The beam was so powerful, so concentrated, that it tore through space itself, bending the fabric of reality with its force. The Sovereign's shields flared under the impact, but they buckled beneath the intensity of the attack. The ship rocked violently as the energy beam ripped through the outer layers of the shields, and the crew was thrown forward, struggling to maintain their balance. "Damage report," Harrison shouted, clutching the edge of her console. "Shields are down to 40%, Captain," Lieutenant Hawk replied, his hands moving frantically. Hull integrity holding for now, but we can't take another hit like that. The ship trembled as another beam of energy shot out from the station, this one striking the Sovereign's port side. The explosion rocked the ship, sending a surge of panic through the crew. The damage was severe, lights flickered, and the hum of the engines began to waver as the ship struggled to maintain stability. "Get us out of here," Harrison ordered, her voice filled with urgency. The Sovereign's engines flared to life, but the ship was still caught in the gravitational pull of the massive station, dragging it slowly toward the structure despite the crew's best efforts to break free. Another surge of energy shot from the station, and this time, it was aimed directly at their engines. "Brace for impact," Harrison shouted as the beam tore into the Sovereign's rear. Sparks flew from the conduits, and the entire ship lurched violently as the engine sputtered. "Damage to the propulsion system. We've lost power," Lieutenant Hawk called out, his voice full of alarm. "Emergency power to thrusters," Harrison ordered, her mind working quickly to assess the situation. "We can't let it pull us in. We need to break free now, or we're done." The U.S. Sovereign struggled against the relentless pull of the station's gravity, but it was too strong. The station's power was growing, and with every passing second, it seemed to become more aware of their presence. Harrison knew that if they couldn't break free soon, the Sovereign would be trapped in its grasp, helpless to escape as whatever ancient force lurked within the station decided their fate. Suddenly, an unexpected voice broke through the tension. "Captain, we've got incoming," one of the tactical officers cried. "Zakar reinforcements." Harrison turned toward the viewport, her eyes narrowing. Despite their defeat, the Zakar weren't done yet. They had regrouped, and now, with the station's awakening, they were ready to launch another assault. This was the moment of truth. Humanity had fought valiantly to prove its worth, but now, against this new incomprehensible enemy, and the Zakar remnants, the stakes had never been higher. Would they escape the jaws of this ancient threat, or had they just stumbled into the darkest chapter of their journey among the stars? Harrison steeled herself for the battle ahead. "Prepare to fight with everything we've got," she said, her voice resolute. "We're not going down without a fight." The U.S. Sovereign groaned under the strain, its hull rattling as the ancient station's gravitational pull grew stronger. The Zakar reinforcements, a fleet of half-functional ships still reeling from their earlier defeat, moved in from the shadows, seemingly drawn to the awakening of the station. Harrison's eyes narrowed as she saw the incoming Zakar vessels, smaller, but numerous and desperate. They knew they couldn't face the Sovereign alone, not after the losses they'd already suffered, but with the station's power at their back, they could be a threat again. "Captain, the Zakar are closing in," Lieutenant Hawk called out, urgency in his voice. "They're launching full assault." "Understood," Harrison replied, her mind racing. They were caught between two forces now, one they could fight, and one they couldn't even begin to understand. The Zakar might be an immediate threat, but the station could be the real danger. If they couldn't stop it, nothing else would matter. "Helm, take us up and to the left. Break their formation. Tactical, target their lead ships. We need to thin their numbers, but don't focus too much on them. We can't afford to waste time." Harrison's orders rang out across the bridge, her voice as steady as ever. They had no choice. The Zakar were on the verge of regrouping, and if they allowed themselves to be bogged down in that fight, the station would finish them off. The Sovereign responded to her commands, lurching forward in a sudden burst of power as the ship twisted through space, narrowly avoiding another wave of Zakar fire. The Zakar ships closed in, their guns blazing. But the human warship was quicker than the Zakar anticipated, its movements sharp and unpredictable. The first Zakar ship in line exploded in a shower of sparks and debris as the Sovereign's pulse cannons found their mark. "Good hit," Lieutenant Hawk shouted. "The shields are down on their flank. We can finish them." "We will," Harrison replied. "But not yet. We need to be quick, but we also need to get that station under control. Another Zukar vessel, this one a larger destroyer, fired a concentrated plasma burst. It struck the Sovereign directly, but the human ship's shields absorbed most of the blast. The ship shuddered, but it remained intact, pushing forward with relentless purpose. Damage report. Harrison barked, glancing around at her crew. She could feel the tension mounting, the crew working tirelessly to keep the ship from falling apart. We've got some hull breaches in the aft section, Captain. Minor, nothing critical yet, the tactical officer replied, sweat dripping down his face. But the Zukar are pushing hard. They're not retreating. Hold them off, Harrison ordered, turning back to Hawk. Keep their attention on us. We're about to show them why they should fear humanity. Lieutenant Hawk didn't need any more instruction. With a quick motion, he tapped a command on his console, and a series of decoy drones shot from the Sovereign's base. The drones scattered in a dozen directions, mimicking the ship's energy signatures, distracting the Zukar long enough to allow the Sovereign to fire off a series of devastating missiles. Direct hits, the weapons officer called. One Zukar destroyer down. Their remaining ships are scattering. It was a small victory, but it bought them precious time. For now, the Zukar fleet was in disarray, their coordination shattered. Yet, even as they fought back, the ancient station continued to pulse with energy, its presence looming over the battlefield like a specter. The Zukar were relentless, but if they didn't neutralize the station, they were doomed regardless. Captain, we've lost more shields, the tactical officer warned. If we don't get out of this soon, we'll be sitting ducks. Harrison's gaze shifted toward the vast expanse of space where the station loomed. It was as if it were watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Captain, incoming pulse from the station, Hawk called out, his voice full of alarm. Before Harrison could react, a massive surge of energy erupted from the station, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The pulse was unlike any weapon they had faced, more like a wave, an invisible force that shook everything in its path. The Sovereign's shields flared up, but it wasn't enough to completely absorb the force. The ship was rocked violently, throwing the crew to the floor and sending sparks from consoles. We're losing control, the helm officer cried, fighting to regain steady navigation. Harrison gritted her teeth. Focus, everyone. Get the engines back online. Tactical, keep the Zukar off our backs for as long as you can. With a renewed burst of energy, the crew of the Sovereign scrambled to keep the ship intact. But even as the crew worked tirelessly to fight the Zukar and maintain control of their ship, Harrison's mind was on the station. That surge wasn't just a weapon, it was a message. The station was active now, and it had made its intentions clear. The Zukar might have been a formidable enemy, but the true threat was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. We need to end this, Harrison muttered, clenching her fists. Now, the U.S. Sovereign was on the edge. The bridge trembled as another massive pulse from the station slammed into the ship, rattling the crew and shaking the very structure of the vessel. The hull groaned as it absorbed the force, but the Sovereign held its ground. Barely. The Zukar fleet, although reeling from earlier losses, had regrouped, and now they were moving in again, sensing weakness. But Harrison knew the real danger wasn't the Zukar anymore. It was the station. Captain, shields are at 15%, Lieutenant Hawk reported, his voice strained as his fingers danced across the console. We're losing hull integrity in several sections. We can't take much more of this. Harrison's gaze fixed on the distant station, its energy surging with a strange, almost sentient rhythm. The Zukar ships were still circling the Sovereign, but they had begun to act erratically, caught between their desire to finish off the humans and the undeniable pull of the ancient station. It was as if both forces were locked in a silent contest for dominance, each trying to establish control over the battlefield. We need to neutralize that station. Now, Harrison said, her voice icy and resolute. We can't outlast it. If we don't take it down, the Zakar will be nothing but a distraction. How do we destroy it? Asked Lieutenant Hawk, his concern evident. It's far too big. We've got nothing in our arsenal that could hit it with the force needed. Captain Harrison clenched her fists. We don't need to destroy it outright. We just need to disable it. We need to target its core. If we can find a weakness in its structure, we might be able to disrupt its power source. But we can't waste time figuring out the details. We've got one shot. The tactical officer, barely holding himself together under the pressure, chimed in. There's a weak point in the station's outer framework, Captain. It's heavily armored, but there's a gap. I can calculate the trajectory for a precise hit, but we need to get close enough. Harrison nodded. Do it. Captain, Hawk said, glancing over his shoulder. There's still this card to deal with. They won't just let us get close. I know, Harrison said grimly. But we don't have a choice. The Sovereign surged forward, engines roaring back to life despite the near-crippling damage it had sustained. The Zakar fleet, seeing their opportunity, began closing in, their guns firing wildly. They knew that if they could destroy the human ship, they could claim victory, but Harrison had no intention of letting that happen. Target their engines, Hawk. We need to disable their ships long enough to get us into firing range of the station, she ordered. With precise timing, the Sovereign unleashed a barrage of fire that shredded the nearest Zakar destroyer's engines, causing the ship to spin out of control and detonate in a fiery explosion. The Sovereign darted through the debris, avoiding another salvo of plasma shots as it made a beeline for the station. The Zakar, in a desperate attempt to hold their ground, closed in on the human warship. A series of heavy plasma bolts struck the Sovereign, and the ship rocked violently, but Harrison didn't flinch. The station loomed large on the horizon, its surface crackling with energy. There was no more room for hesitation. They had one chance to end this. Captain, we're in position, Lieutenant Hawk announced. Firing now. The Sovereign's main cannon charged with blinding light, and the Singularity cannon, now fully powered, unleashed a concentrated beam directly at the station's weak point. The beam slammed into the gap in the station's armor, the energy twisting and distorting the fabric of space itself as it burrowed deep into the heart of the station's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shockwave rippled out from the impact site. The station shuddered, its energy pulse faltering as the power within it began to destabilize. The gravitational pull began to waver, its control over the surrounding space faltering. The Zakar, sensing the shift, began retreating in disarray, realizing too late that the station had lost its hold over them. Direct hit, the tactical officer shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. The station's core is destabilizing. We did it. Harrison watched as the massive structure began to break apart. The energy pulses sputtered, and the once ominous hum of the station faded into nothingness. The gravitational anomaly that had been dragging them toward it dissipated, releasing the Sovereign from its grip. The Zakar fleet, no longer coordinated, began to scatter. Some of the ships attempted to flee, while others disengaged in confusion. They were broken, their will to fight shattered by the fall of the station. Cease fire, Harrison ordered, her voice a mix of relief and weariness. Let them run. The Sovereign hovered in space, its battered hull slowly stabilizing. The remnants of the Zakar fleet fled into the dark expanse, leaving behind a trail of destruction and uncertainty. But Harrison knew this wasn't the end. The U.S. Sovereign had just struck a blow for humanity, but there were far greater threats waiting in the stars. The station had been only a fraction of what lay out there in the unknown. Yet for now, they had survived. Harrison sat back in her command chair, her expression somber. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. We'll be ready, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. Humanity has made its mark. And somewhere out there, deep in the void, the rest of the galaxy was starting to take notice.